in a work context, I'm a freelance experience designer and creative. And, it's funny because people still ask me a lot, like, what is it that I do? And in simple terms, I design websites, mobile apps, web apps, anything in the digital world that it's interacted with. And my role as an experience designer is to ensure that whatever I design is not only fit for purpose, but it's actually intuitive and easy to use and enjoyable as well. So think of a time that you went on a website and that website was very easy to use and it was enjoyable and you felt like you were able to complete the steps you needed to do very quickly. That's essentially what my role is. And the creative side is one that I kind of like to inject into that process. So not only I want to do websites that are intuitive or apps that are simple to use, but that are also memorable and fun. So always finding that, synergy between those two areas. I've been doing this for over 10 years now. This is a picture of me back then. Very early days when I was getting started, around 2014 roughly, which is when I first landed, or when I landed my first design job actually. And back then the industry looked very, very different. It's kind of funny to think back and to reflect a little bit on it, but the very first website I actually designed it in Photoshop, believe it or not. It sounds crazy right now, but actually that's what we used. And, in a sort of pace of a couple of years, the industry was evolving very fast and, new tools came around, new processes came around. And, obviously with that, my process changed and I was learning a lot. And of course, my work was getting better by the day. And I actually managed to see a great sort of progression in the industry in those 2 years. Those first 2 years of the job were actually incredible because I was able to learn a lot. So around 2016, I decided to quit that first job and to go on a freelance journey. I felt like I had acquired enough experience, and so I wanted to sort of start my own journey and be independent. So I went ahead and did that. And, between 2016 and 2019, I was actually doing some great work. I was landing some incredible gigs, working with some incredible brands. But, up until this point, I felt like a lot of my work was sort of a little bit repetitive, and even though I was working with incredible brands, the natural progression of the industry and the maturity of the industry meant that a lot of the work that I was doing, which was commercial work, felt a little bit sort of same. And I wasn't really tapping into the creative side of me. I was definitely tapping into the experience design side of me. But I felt like I needed something that excited me. So around 2019, after feeling a bit stuck, I went on a bit of a quest to find a creative outlet. And at the time, Instagram was feeding me with a bunch of 3D stuff. I guess I must have given a hint to the algorithm that I was into 3D. And so I started getting all these 3D projects, and I was always a fan of 3D. And I've never really intended to be a 3D designer or was something that I even wanted to do at the time. But, in all this mix of seeing all this 3D work, I came across a tool called Spline 3D, which essentially suggested that I could learn how to do 3D with a smaller learning curve that I would have with any other software. And because I was in this quest to kind of find some creative outlet, I decided to give Spline a go. So very quickly, I fell in love with the tool and I was actually having a lot of fun. Spline 3D became kind of a playground for me where I would go and just create freely. It was actually really powerful because for the first time, I felt like I was doing work without any deadlines. This had no commercial link. It basically was an opportunity to create and have fun. And I would basically finish work and go home and do a little bit of, maybe a couple of hours where I'll spend just, playing around with the platform, doing 3D graphics and actually injecting a little bit of motion into this. It was really fun. And not only I was able to tap into 3D, I was also able to tap into motion, which again was something that I guess I never really thought about as much, but all of a sudden the platform was allowing me to do it, and I was really enjoying the process. So the only issue was that it felt like a lot of the stuff that I was doing here was sort of getting lost. I wasn't really sharing the work, and I was doing all these 3D graphics, but it kind of felt like they were sort of staying in Spline and not really going anywhere. And so I thought maybe I could turn this into something else. And I've always been very interested in music. I've always been, I guess, passionate about music. It's one of my hobbies. And so I thought maybe I could find a way to combine all these new skills that I'm gaining, all these 3D graphics with music. And a lot of these graphics actually already kind of felt like they could go very well with some sort of sound. And so I started exploring these mini projects where I would combine these 3D graphics that I'm working on with essentially a little bit of music and visual design. And again, this was sort of a opportunity to explore a new area of design and to do something that had no commercial link or wasn't really intended to do anything else but, be a place where I could just freely create. I started doing these posters once a week, and I would share them on socials. It kind of became, again, another experiment, really. And indirectly, and this is what's most interesting about this, is that by experimenting, I was actually able to learn a bunch of new things that I didn't really plan for. So again, I was able to tap into motion and 3D design. Now, the only issue was, again, that, I'm doing all this work and I'm doing all these posters where I'm combining visual design and 3D and motion, but it kind of feels like this is a side project, and being a side project, I'm really enjoying that part. But, on a day-to-day, when I go to work and I'm actually doing the experience design side of things, it feels like I'm not actually enjoying that part as much. And it feels like there's a little bit of a disconnect between those two worlds. So I was really trying to find a way to connect those two. And, it really kept me awake, trying to think, how can I combine these two worlds that I'm gravitating between? And then at some point, I come across this video, I believe, which suggested that I can actually combine 3D graphics from Spline 3D, which I had already been doing a lot, with a tool called Framer. And at the time, I had no idea what Framer was. But essentially, Framer suggested that I could build websites using 3D graphics without any code. And to me, that was like a magic wand. Like someone had given me the magic trick that I needed to be able to combine these two skill sets and these two worlds. And, I had already been doing websites, of course, that felt a little bit same. And being able to now integrate all these 3D graphics was like, all of a sudden, there was a huge opportunity to create something really cool. So I got really excited. And at the time, actually, I needed a new website. It was time for me to redesign my portfolio. And, as a designer, your portfolio is kind of the biggest opportunity and the best opportunity that you have to not only showcase the work that you've done, but showcase what you're capable of. And that's something that to me is really important. I think as designers, again, especially if you work in commercial projects, often you end up feeling like you don't get the opportunity to really shine and show what you can do. So take your portfolio as the opportunity to do that. And that's what I did. So with Framer, I was able to, again, tap into areas that I had never really tapped into before, like motion, again, 3D, and a bunch of other stuff. This platform was actually really powerful, and for me to discover it and to be able to work on it was actually incredible. So not only I got to redesign my website, I was so excited about Framer that I just kept going and building all these little projects. I would, pitch ideas to friends and I would build them websites. I would essentially just find any potential project that I can build in website and in Framer and just go for it. I was really immersing myself into this platform, and for the first time, actually, it felt like I was being able to have fun again, doing what I do. And, not only being able to have fun, but also experiment a little bit. Because again, I was using all these projects as little experiments where there was no right or wrong. So for me, Framer was really an opportunity to experiment, to create freely and to showcase my work. So that leads me to part 2, which is the workshop. And in the same way that Framer gave me an opportunity to create a memorable website and to have fun, I actually want to do the same for you. So I've prepared this workshop as a way to show you how easy it is to learn and to build something in Framer that can actually be something memorable. So this specific template and website that we're going to be building, it's actually a 3D gallery that you can use as a portfolio if you're a creative. But also, if you are new to Framer, this is an opportunity for you to see the platform, how it works, and the things that you can do. So I'm going to reiterate again, if you want to remix the project, you can go onto my website, alejandromejias.com.au/frontrow2025, and you can get the project from there. And if you want to sign up to Framer, you can do it from there too. And if you also want to just sit back, relax, watch it for now, you can do so and then come back to it later on. So what I'm actually going to do now is we're going to move on to our project here in Framer. And we can see here, perfect. So essentially what we've got here is the start of a project. And what we're going to do basically is we want to take our basic project into an interactive gallery, as you can see here, which essentially is showing some work. And as you click on it, you can go onto a project details page with a little bit more information. And we're going to do that by going into our project. And so what we're going to do first is we're going to start setting up our frame here. And the way in which we do that is we're going to draw a frame across our screen here. And first of all, we want to switch off this fill option that's coming as default. The reason why I'm doing that is because I want to work with this black background, just like the original template. And this frame is the very first step and the foundation of the website. Now, it's very important that we set up this frame in the correct size here. So what we want to do is we want to set it up at 100% width and 100% viewport. That's essentially saying to the browser that all the content will be contained in that viewport size. And what we're going to do then is we're going to start building the gallery. So for that, I've actually uploaded an image already in the project. And this is an image, of course, that you can change later on. So, if you want to add your own images, of course, you can. But for now, we're just going to work with this. And what we're going to do is we're going to drag our image onto the frame. And by doing that, that's setting up the image right in the center of our page. And what we want to do then is we want to set this image up to be a perfect square. So it's already a square, but what we want to make sure we do is we lock the aspect ratio of this image. And the way in which we do that is we're going to hit this lock icon here. So you can already see that we've got a perfect square. But what's more important is that you want to set the width to a relative size. So instead of a fixed number, we're going to use percentages. And what that's essentially doing is telling the browser that, or the image more specifically, that as you resize your browser, your image is also going to resize. So that's very important for when we actually, when we see this in a large screen, we also want the images to enlarge accordingly. So that's the very first step. Now comes the fun part, which is we're going to now duplicate this image a few times so that we can create our gallery. And for the purpose of this, I'm going to do 6 images in total. Again, there's no right or wrong here, really. You can play around with as many images as you want. It really comes down to what works best for you. But for this, we're just going to do 6. So I want to make sure that we've got 6 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Perfect. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to spread these images around my canvas here. And I'm doing that just so I can see all the images that I'm working with. Now, this doesn't have to be perfect. And in fact, these images are not going to stay here in this exact position. All I want to do is I want to make sure I get a good view of all of them. Perfect. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I actually want to name these layers correctly. Just a bit of housekeeping to ensure that I know what images that I'm working with. This will come handy later on and you see why. So we're going to use a basic naming convention for these images. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to call this image R1, R for right. And because we're kind of working from the outside in, and we're working with an even number of 6 images, 3 on the right, 3 on the left, I'm going to use this naming convention of R1, R2, and R3. And then I basically want to repeat the same, but for left. So I'm going to do left 3. Then we're going to call this left 2, and then we're going to call this left 1. Perfect. So what we want to do now actually is, and this is probably the fun part really, is we want to make sure that our images are rotated, and we give them that 3D effect that ultimately makes them look like our original version here. So you can see actually that the images sort of rotate inwards. And so, we want to create this effect that the images sort of go from the edge all the way into the middle. So for that, we actually need to add a couple of attributes onto our images. So we're going to start by selecting all of images here. And what we want to do is we want to go into our transform section. Now, this image is already got a rotate attribute, which I've already added. What you want to do is you want to go into 3D, and that's essentially what's going to give it that 3D effect. And another attribute that you want to add to this image is the perspective. Now, we will be tweaking these values in a minute, but we have to do that image by image. So just leave it for now. And what you want to do then is you want to go image by image and actually change the Y value of the rotation. You don't have to worry about the other values. We're just going to worry about the Y value. And that's because we want the image to rotate but stay put where it is. And again, here's where experimentation comes in. I don't think there's a right value. I don't think there's right or wrong again. But I'm going to use a number that works for me. And I'm going to start with 30. And because we're starting on the edge and we want our image to kind of rotate backwards, if you like, we're going to use a positive number. But when you do the same thing on the other end, and effectively we're just mirroring what we're doing on the other end, we're going to start using negative numbers. And you want to kind of use the same number that you used before. So if I started with 30 on the edge of the gallery, I'm going to use the same value here on the other end. And all of a sudden, we're starting to see a little bit of rotation on our images. And from here on, you basically do the same exercise with each image. The only difference is that we're going to add increments. So we started with 30. Now we're going to use 40. And we're going to use minus 40 here. And again, this is so that the images feel like they're kind of moving closer to the middle. And we've already used 40, and we're using increments of 10. So we're going to start with, we're going to add 50 here, and we're going to add minus 50 here. Okay, perfect. So you can already see that there is a little bit of that gallery effect, 3D gallery effect happening, but you can see that our images are a little bit out of place. So what we want to do is we want to send these two images to the back, and we do that by hitting the open bracket key, and there we go. And now we want to ensure that our images are actually in the right place. So again, when we resize the browser, this doesn't happen. We want to make sure that our images stay in the right position. So the best way to do that is to go into our position section here. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to match the values of the end of the screen. So with each image, we have 120 pixels on the right, and we want to make sure that our toggle pins for that image are in the middle. And then with this image here on the left, it's 120 as well. Toggle pin in the middle. Now we're gonna go into our second image. And again, these values, you can play around with them. It's fine. You don't have to follow exactly what I'm doing here. You can play around with these yourself and see what works best for you. I'm just going to stick with 230 here. Essentially what we're doing is we're adding margin on the left. So I'm telling Framer to put this image on the far left with 230 pixels, but stay in the middle. So I'm gonna do the same with this image, and I'm going to change this to 230 and put this in the middle as well. And then I'm gonna do the same here. I'm gonna change the value slightly. I want this image to feel like it's sitting on top of that other image there. I'm gonna put the pin in the middle there. That is 370 on the left. And now I'm going to replicate the same thing here, 370 on the right. Perfect. Bit of a manual process, yet very important to ensure that our images are all in the right place. So hopefully if I resize this, they all staying in the same place, and some of them are. Actually, what has happened, and this happens often when you change the positioning, is that the images might have lost the correct sizing. So I can see these two images have lost their aspect ratio and their relative width. So again, want to make sure those images, there we go, have those attributes. So again, it's all about the placing, very important. But feel free to play around with these numbers. Again, you know, the size of the image, it depends on you, the spacing that you have between the images and where they sit, it's completely up to you. This is just what's working for me now. And so I'm going to leave it as is. I'm quite happy with how this looks. Now, the gallery is almost there, but it does feel like it's missing something. And that's because we haven't added shadows yet. So we're going to go ahead and in the same way that we did before, we're going to select our images and we're going to hit the shadow attribute here under styles. For this, we're actually going to go and only add shadows to the 4 images at the top. Of course, you don't have to worry about the last image because there's nothing behind that. So we're going to go ahead and change the shadow of this first image here on the left. And what you actually want to do is you want to make sure that all your images are using a drop shadow that is the exact same color as your background. And so I'm using black, so I'm going to go 100% on that slider. And I'm going to go back here to my image. And what I actually want to do is I want to add a value on the X axis, but because I'm working on the left hand side, I need to add a negative value. So I'm going to do that. And the values that you need to change for the shadows are the X values, and you can also play around a little bit with your blur and your spread. That's so that we get a more realistic effect and you just don't get a block that doesn't feel natural. So I'm going to play around with these numbers a bit. This looks good. I'm quite happy with it. And once I'm done with this image, what I can essentially do is I can go into my shadow section. I can copy that, and then I'm just going to paste it again here, and boom, I've already got the drop shadows working on one end of the gallery. And you know, there may be other ways to do this, but here's a bit of a shortcut. You can also paste the same shadow on the other end, but of course now you want to use a positive value for the X axis. So essentially you're sort of showing the shadow on the opposite side. And that's starting to look much better now, in my opinion. I think that already gives it a little bit of that three-dimensional look. It feels a bit more realistic. Actually, this is again where experimentation really comes in. You know, if you want to play around with the rotation of some of your images, that's also fine. I can show you quickly what that looks like. I just noticed that the image was sort of overlapping in the middle, and I felt like I needed to add a little bit more rotation. So I'm going to go back to my rotation here, and that just feels a bit better there with a bit of a gap in between the images. Awesome. Again, you know, this is where the experimentation part really comes in, and where, you know, Framer gives you the freedom to play around and to just see what works best. So if you want to add radius to your image, you can do so by going into your style section and playing around with the radius of the images. And, you know, I feel that that's kind of cool. That could work as well. So we've got our gallery, but now we're missing a very important aspect of this gallery, which is that hover effect that you see, which is essentially when you put your mouse over the image moves slightly to the top. Now, so the way in which we do that, so we're going to go into our images, and again, we want to select them all and go into our effects section here. And what we want to do is we want to add a hover effect. Now, you can see that I've added the hover effect, and all of a sudden my images have gone flat. And the reason why that happens is because by default, the hover effect changes the rotation of your image. And it actually also changes the scale of the image. So what we actually want to do is we want to change some of these attributes and the details here on our hover effect. So first off, what we're going to do is we're going to tell Framer to keep the scale at 1. We don't want our images to change not in this case. Again, it's an area that you can explore if you wish. And what's very important is we actually toggle the 3D rotation on. So again, we're basically telling Framer to keep our image rotated as the hover effect happens. Now, it's a bit of a manual process because we have to go image by image, but I promise you it's not a hard one. So I'm going to start with the image on the left, and I'm going to go into my hover effect. And basically all I need to do is replicate the exact number that I've used in the original image. So for this image, I've got 30 pixels. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the same. But what I want to do here is to add some offset pixels. So essentially, I'm going to tell Framer that when I hover on this image, that image is going to move 25 pixels up. And I do that by adding a minus number here in the offset section. Now, we're going to do the same with all of these images. So remember, we're replicating the 3D rotation, and I'm going to do minus 25 here. This is 60. And then I'm going to change this to 25, minus 25. Now we want to do the same thing here again. So we're going to do minus 60 on the rotation, minus 25 for the offset, minus 25 for the offset, and minus 40 here. And then this, we want to make sure that's the same number. So again, we're going minus 30 and minus 25. Excellent. So hopefully if I preview this, it should work. And it works, actually. That's pretty good. So as I hover on each image, you can see the image sort of jumps. Again, another opportunity for experimentation. I'm not a big fan of the hover effect and the way that it jumps. So I can actually change that a little bit. And because I've already added the right rotation to each image, what I can actually do is I can select all of my images. I can go into hover effect, and without changing any of the values, but going into the transition, I can actually change what the motion of that hover effect looks like. I'm a big fan of working with physics. For me, it's what works best. Again, as I said before, here is an opportunity for you to explore. I just really like the way in which the physics kind of make the transition feel smoother. And I usually like to work with these values. So 400 for stiffness and 100 for damping. That just makes the image kind of go into sort of a slower kind of motion. So I'm going to preview this, and boom. That's looking much better. I'm really happy with the look. Now, all it's left to do is, as I said before, in the beginning, you can change these images. So, you know, at this point, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to upload some images that I've got here prepared. And we're adding our images now. And there we go. So essentially, in just a few steps, we're able to create a 3D gallery with absolutely no code. And you can see that not only is a way to showcase some work, but it's also an interactive element. So, you know, I think that's the beauty about Framery. It allows you to go from an idea into execution really fast, and into, you know, and tapping into areas, you know, like motion and, you know, even 3D to make your experience, or the experience for someone who's visiting your website, way more memorable than if they were looking at this, you know, in 2D and if it was flat. Now, what's left is you want to connect each image to another page where you go and see more details about that particular artwork that you're showing. And the easiest way to do that is by selecting your image and going into the link section here on your right hand side panel. And I've already created a case study page here, so I'm just going to connect that. And if we preview this, what's going to happen is as I click on my image, I can go onto my project details. Now, of course, there's only so much time that we have today, and I can't show you every single step on how to create this case study page. But, you know, let me know if you really like this content, if you really like this video and you want to learn how to use Framer, you want to learn more about this particular template, reach out. I'm more than happy to help you out and to create more content like this, where I'll show you the power of Framer and where, you know, we can work together in creating a more exciting world with exciting websites.
Awesome, man. Great stuff.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Session number 1 is done. I've got a few questions for you, and just quick reminder to anyone in the chat, if you want to ask Ali here a question, just drop it in the chat so my team can see it and they can let me know in my ears, so then I can ask you right here. That's how it's going to work.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Personal question from me first off the bat.
Sure.
When did you find the balance between like good design and then pairing that with like animation? Because I think like one of your great strengths and what really stands out about your work is your pairing of a very motion-based form versus a very static form in terms of the work.
I feel like I've always been interested in motion, even though I never really pursue it per se, you know, and I think there's almost a little man in my head telling me what the right animation should look like, and it's often a bit of a challenge because animation is something that, you know, it's very easy to know if you didn't get it right, you know, and so for me it's about experimenting a lot. I mean, I don't think I always get it 100%, you know, it's always a matter of exploring and kind of gut feeling, you know. It's just really about, you know, playing around with it until it feels like it's actually right.
Yeah, okay. Did you ever, like, as a kid, like, play around with, like, stick figure animations and stuff like that?
I played with Legos a lot when I was growing up.
Okay.
And I don't know if that actually helped.
Were you, like, one of those, like, stop motion animation kids?
I actually watched a lot of cartoons, you know, and I think my favorite cartoons were the ones that were, you know, often created, you know, with graphics. And so I think, you know, maybe, you know, I kind of grew up with a bit of an influence on motion design without really knowing it. Again, I can't really say for sure if I know what the perfect animation looks like, but more often than not, when I'm playing around with Framer, I just move the numbers and change the numbers as much as I can until it actually feels right.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Very good. Like I mentioned, there's a ton of questions coming in already, so feel free to add them in the chat. First ones that has come in is, how do you think AI will change the role as designers over the years? I know this is like a very
loaded question.
It is very loaded, right? I think it's like a very popular question that gets asked too, because we're kind of at this stage where it's like, okay, there's this new technology emerging. Is that good for us or bad for us? What's your thoughts?
I think it's good. I honestly think it's definitely changing our industry, and it's changing it in a way that, in the same way that the internet changed industries, you know, back in 2000, and the same way that factories change, you know, the world in which people lived a while back. So, I mean, to me, this tool, this technology, it just, you know, it's just a new opportunity to create work. There's a lot of tools out there now that help us designers, you know, be better at what we do, be faster. I think if anything, it's just going to make our industry, you know, way more powerful. I think, you know, it enables us to be better designers. So I keep saying this, you know, AI is something that we should engage with and not be scared of.
For sure. Very interesting. You use a lot of tools, right? Like, I love that you use both Framer and Spline together to kind of like add this new use case. Is there any other sort of like tools in the, whether it be the 3D world or just the design world, that are like interesting to you at the moment that you're starting to explore?
I'm trying to tap into AI a little bit more, and it's interesting. I mean, there's so much out there. I'm still kind of curating what's good for me. I know Midjourney is definitely something that, it's in my list, and it's something that I'm trying to, explore even further. Someone told me the other day, Claude is a very good OpenAI, and seems to be better than ChatGPT, at least for, creative work, especially, using AI with Framer. You can create a lot of components actually using AI, and I've used ChatGPT for that in the past, and it doesn't really get it. You have to try it a few times until it gets it. So yeah, Claude's definitely one that I'm going to be trying a lot more with Framer.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think Claude's like stronger for like development and like obviously writing that code compared to like what GPT is right now.
Yes.
Another one that comes to mind, and I can't think of the name of it, but I'm sure someone in the chat can help me out. There's this new like AI design tool, and it's almost like Midjourney, like it's for generating images. But their whole kind of like principle for it is like for generating like what would be, you go to unsplash.com and try to find an image.
Yes.
Instead of like searching, I want a man in a blue shirt, you could put that into this tool, and then it would AI generate that kind of like stock photo image that's kind of built for these use cases that we use as designers.
Okay.
And I think that's like one like really great practical use case for like AI in terms of like our design workflow.
100%.
But is there anything else in terms of like practically that you're doing to kind of embed AI or even just automation into your workflow that doesn't necessarily take away from your work as a creative, but just like speeds up or adds to the process?
Well, I think the components, the Framer components, is actually a great example. I came across Nandy's video, who he's actually part of the lineup here at the event. There is a video which I recommend you watch it if you haven't, where he explains how to leverage ChatGPT or any AI really to help you build components. And I've actually already used it a couple of times. And like I said, it doesn't get it 100% right from the first go, but it's definitely an incredible and very powerful way to turn an idea very quickly into something that's functional. I think personally, often I find myself craving something else when it comes to Framer. There's obviously a lot of stuff out of the box, but there are certain custom things that I want to build that I'm not able to because I'm not a developer. I think that's when AI can be a very, very powerful, almost right hand, best friend that you can have sitting next to you, help you build incredible stuff.
For sure. Especially as like creatives, because we can like picture what that looks like in our heads.
100%.
But when it comes to like execution, we don't know, especially when it's development led, we don't technically know how to do that.
100%.
But if you can figure out how to articulate that and communicate that into a tool like that, then that can be the heavy lifting. Because as creatives, like what's in our head is our value. So if we can take that and we can figure out a way to kind of essentially just communicate that to these tools, then they can do the heavy lifting.
That's spot on. I couldn't say it any better. And I think that's what, AI is really good for. When I started, I would have to sit next to a developer. Now I would need to explain exactly what my idea was. And more often than not, there was miscommunications. Things didn't really look like I intended them to. And so, today the world looks very different. I can go and, write a prompt exactly, how I'm thinking about it with my own words even, and without using any jargon. And, you can actually come up with something incredible,
For sure. Now, your website, your actual portfolio, I'm sure we'll link it in the chat, or we'll there'll be a link somewhere. Definitely go check it out. It's like a beautiful website. Like it's been featured everywhere on the internet, which is cool.
Thanks,
man.
man.
I was actually on a learning page, inspiration sort of site the other day. I'm like, that face looks familiar. And it was your website. But what I love about it is obviously you do a really good job at mixing both animation with that visual design. But I think often misconception or what people often do with their websites is they go too far with animation.
Yeah.
And it becomes so overwhelming, and also it impacts the performance of, say, your website. How do you kind of like find the line between what is too much versus not enough of animation and effects to make your site actually, you know, come to life?
I love that question because I'm guilty of charge, to be honest. Sometimes I feel like I go overboard and then I need to tone it down a little bit. Again, I feel it's all about gut feeling, and really I can't claim that I'm a motion designer. There's, you know, people who are 10 times better than
Sure.
I am that specialize in that. But when it comes to interactions, I think the key really is to think about what the interaction is doing. So when you jump on a website, you have to think, you know, if you're the designer of that website, you have to think what the audience is and what they're looking for. I think if you're doing too much, for you as a designer, it might look cool, but the person on the other end who's using this website for a specific goal may feel like those interactions are kind of getting on the way to complete a task.
Sure.
Whereas if you're creating something that is more of an experience, an immersive experience, and you want people to feel like the animations are kind of telling a story, then, you know, it's okay to go a little bit, you know, above and beyond. So it's really about, I guess, finding the balance, and ultimately it's about storytelling, right? I think that's the key thing. So, you know, think of micro interactions as a way to add to that storytelling aspect of a design, and not to take away from it.
Yeah, because I think it's really easy just to like go, all right, let's just animate everything, let's make everything pop, and it becomes very oversaturated.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier just to add more things to something than say try to take things away. And I think we kind of get trapped in that workflow where I think like a great product at the end of the day is the least amount possible, but still tells that really great experience through story and through brand and all these other attributes.
100%.
Where do you kind of get your inspiration from? Is there any like cool websites and things like that?
Lately, Instagram actually.
Okay.
Instagram's becoming...
it's coming back.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's actually a great place to see what other people are doing. I feel like sometimes when you look for inspiration and you go into a particular website, you kind of end up looking for something specific. You know, even unconsciously. And I kind of find that I've fed my algorithm enough information of the stuff that I want to see. And you know, lately it's been sending me a lot of amazing work. So it's also nice to be able to see the person behind it and see more work that they're doing. But, you know, I think for Framer work, definitely check the Framer gallery. There's some incredible work in there. And yeah, I mean, I think Instagram is definitely for me the main source at the moment.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure. The visual feed. 2 questions before we wrap up. Number 1, what's in store for you this year? What's the game plan?
I definitely want to do more stuff on Framer. You can probably see how excited I get about this platform. So definitely tap onto that a little bit more. You know, as a freelancer, I'm always looking for new work. And so, you know, I'm working with a few projects at the moment. There's probably going to be a few more down the track, but definitely tapping into Framer. I really want to start building some templates, which hopefully I'll be releasing in a couple of months. That's the plan. I want to start, you know, doing a bit more portfolio work like this, you know, helping people out who wants to showcase their work and, you know, they're getting started with Framer. I really want to show how, you know, Framer, in the same way that it helped me, can help other creatives. So
for sure.
Definitely
That's
more
awesome.
of that.
And let everyone know again where they can get in contact with you and how they can keep in touch.
Definitely follow on Instagram, Alejo Meves. That's my handle. Check out my
We'll write that
website.
out because I
Sure,
couldn't pronounce
sure,
it myself.
yeah, absolutely.
You've probably noticed that I've just gone Alejandro. I've written it down on the sheet, but I wasn't ballsy enough to...
Let's definitely do that. Don't worry. But yeah, if you want, just check out my website as well. That's got all my links to X, Instagram, and LinkedIn as well. I use LinkedIn a lot. And, you know, connect, send me a message. Really, don't be a stranger. If you got questions about Framer, let me know. I'm more than happy to help. And yeah, hopefully, you know, everyone enjoy the session.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much, Ali.